So we already know that photosynthesis takes place in the chloroplast. That's my big organelle here that would be found inside a plant cell. And we also know that the light-dependent reactions, those that use sunlight, that they occur in the thylakoids. So each one of these little stacks is a thylakoid, and the light-dependent reaction is going on in there. So we're going to zoom in a little further and see what's happening. So each one of these individual thylakoids, so here's one here, we could zoom in on it to see what's happening in the light-dependent reaction. So that's what we're going to do, is we're sort of zooming into this cross-section here, and that's what you see over here. So here, thylakoids have a thylakoid membrane, so that's just this outer bit of the thylakoid, okay, and that's what you see here. It is a bilipid layer, so you can see that means that we've got two layers of phospholipids. So here's a phospholipid and here's phospholipid. So that's why it's a bilipid layer. And that bilipid layer separates the outside of the thylakoid, so the stroma. If we go back out here, this portion here, from the thylakoid lumen, or the inside space of the thylakoid. That's the part that in this image is kind of this pinkish red color, the inside part there. And so what we're going to talk about in this video is how the light that's coming in, you can see it here, ends up getting absorbed and used in the light-dependent reactions. And so we're going to be looking at these little green dots that are embedded in this thylakoid membrane in something called the light harvesting complex, or sometimes called the antenna complex. So the light harvesting complex or the antenna complex is just a bunch of these green circles, which are pigments, which I'll talk about in just a minute, include things like chlorophyll and carotenoids. Okay, so I mentioned pigments. Pigments are just molecules that absorb light. And in plants, there are two major classes. We've got the chlorophylls. Those are the ones that make the plant's leaves green. And that's because they're very good at absorbing red light and blue light. And then what they do is they reflect green light. And so when we look at a leaf and it's green, that's because we're seeing the reflection of the green light by the chlorophylls. Those are not the only kind of pigments we find in plants. We also find carotenoids. Carotenoids absorb more blue and green light, and they reflect yellow, orange, and red light. And actually, when leaves start to change color in the fall, like in our image here, what's happening is the chlorophylls have started to break down due to the cold temperatures, and the carotenoids haven't broken down yet. And so you're starting to see all those colors of the carotenoids. Normally you don't see them because there's so much more chlorophyll. So you tend to see the leaves as green because you're seeing all that chlorophyll. But as the chlorophyll breaks down, you see more of the other colors in the leaves. And so any plant has a combination in their leaves of chlorophylls and carotenoids. That's what makes the leaves all different shades of green and yellow, is what combination of chlorophylls and carotenoids they have. So this graph here shows you for two different types of chlorophylls, two major types, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, exactly what type of light those pigments are good at absorbing. And then it also shows you for carotenoids what type of light that pigment is good at absorbing. Let's look at actually both the chlorophylls together, so this solid line and also the dashed line. They tend to be pretty good at absorbing sort of violet light and blue light. They're not very good at absorbing green light. Okay, they reflect it. And then they're good again at absorbing red light. Versus the carotenoids, you can see that it absorbs slightly different wavelengths of light. It can also do some of that blue light and a little bit of green light that it can absorb. And then it absorbs some of the yellow as well here. All right, so what do I mean by absorbing light? So let me talk about how this works. So we're going to zoom into our light harvesting complex. Again, this is sometimes called an antenna complex. And the way that it works is light energy in the form of photons come in. And what they do is on that chlorophyll molecule or that carotenoid molecule, okay, whichever one it is able to absorb that energy from the light, okay? And the way that it does that, it has electrons that essentially get excited. They store this energy. And when that electron gets excited, okay, I'm kind of wiggling my mouse here to show you that it's excited. What can happen is it can actually pass on this excited energy to another pigment within the reaction complex. So it'll go from one carotenoid to the next carotenoid to a chlorophyll, being passed around from these different pigments that are within this light harvesting complex. And one of the keys in this part is when this energy is getting passed, it's actually just the energy getting passed. So the electrons never leave at this point. The energy just gets passed from one molecule to the next molecule to the next molecule. Okay, it's kind of like it's described as resonance energy, so I think of it as vibrational energy. So the vibration here gets passed here, and then this electron is now excited, and that vibrational energy gets passed along. It gets passed along. And this will happen within the light harvesting complex, the antenna complex, until you get to the reaction center, okay? And it's here in the reaction center where the electrons get excited in the chlorophyll molecule, and in fact, it's a special pair of chlorophyll molecules that we found in the reaction center. And now, when these electrons get excited, what will happen is the electrons now will leave, okay? They leave and they move to an electron acceptor, another molecule that we're going to talk more about in later videos, that then can transfer this energy elsewhere. And our next video will go more into what happens when this electron is passed on to this primary electron acceptor.